Om Vachum Nyachatwani Tam Nyacham Buddha Diyam Yachacha Buddhi Shakshini Tam Chapi Purnatwani Nirvikalpe Vilapya Shantim Parnamam Vijasva Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That practitioner of blissful dissolution dissolves the word into the mind into the intellect into the ego into the witness, and the witness into the Atman. And then he merges all of these with Brahman. Brahman is the soul of all. That boundless expanse of pure conscious awareness called Brahman, replete with the nectar-like swell of the Atman, into which my mind fell like a hailstone into the ocean, transported me into eternal peace and ecstatic bliss. Om peace, peace, peace. Om peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. And it is that state so well described by Shankara in this chant I just recited out of the Viveka Chudamani, actually two chants, that defines the title of our class this week, basically around original mind. So the series over the next 3 Sundays is going to be called Obsessed Mind, Ordinary Mind, and Original Mind. And those of you who have been with us the last 6 to 9 Sundays, that is the last 3 class series, know that I've been taking each one of these one at a time over a series of 3 classes. Like the last series was called Naham, Kaham, and Saham that we just finished. I'm not that. Who am I then? I'm this. And so I took each one of those one class and spent a full time on each one of them. But this time with obsessed mind, ordinary mind, and original mind, I'd like to sort of take them, all 3 of them in each class, and show you charts that are pertinent to the awakening of ordinary mind to higher mind, rather than just sort of conclude that there's an obsessed mind and you can't get out of it, so we have to focus on it and concentration on it, sort of like watering the weeds rather than the flowers, which is the opposite of what the Vedantist likes to do. Or even just harp too much on the ordinary mind, because these are actually not brains or probably even subtle bodies so much as states, which one comes in and out of. It's like Holy Mother saying, and I said it at satsang yesterday, that at one cycle, a man will get a propensity to do good actions. And another cycle, all of a sudden, that same man will have a propensity to do bad actions. So obviously, he or she, or that human being, is coming in and out of different levels of mind when they're performing their actions or when they're thinking about doing action. And of course, we know that aligns very well with sattva, the guna of balance, and rajas, the guna of activity, and tamas, the guna of slothfulness or laziness. So we can look at that too and keep that in mind as we look at obsessed mind, ordinary mind, and original mind. Today, if you're in India or if you're Far East, you're living in Kali Puja. That's that auspicious day for the Divine Mother of the Universe, who is new moon kind of mother. She's all black, like vast space, and Her smile is that too. Her glistening white teeth come out like moons and suns out of this blackness of space. And she blesses her precious spiritual children with a vision of formlessness. And scarcely do they see her in form. The yogis sit in dark mountain caves to try and catch a glimpse of her radiant blackness, if such a beautiful statement could be made about her. And that darkness around them enhances the beauty of that light, that rare light that comes through to the mind. So if that's the case and you're in the West, then of course tomorrow will be Kali Puja. So it's a very beautiful time to begin this class series on the mind. Another saying of Holy Mother in that regard is that the mind is the most important thing to you right now, my child, because it's through that mind that you will get to Brahman. That's in this particular embodied state she's talking about. The mind becomes extremely important for us. And so she said, keep it in fine and fettled shape. That is, you must make sure that you treat it like a friend. This, one of the teachings in Vedanta is the 3 types of mind and the 3 kinds of boons that go with that. So if you have the boon of a human birth, manusyatvan, precious human birth, and you have the boon of a good spiritual teacher who can clarify the truth for you, and then you have the boon of a desire to be free, mumukshutvam, a very rare kind of level of desire to be free from bondage and suffering, and to see the Lord face to face. All 3 of those, if you have them, are a good thing, but they might not quite be enough, Holy Mother said, if you don't have the friendship of your own mind. Maitri, they call that in Sanskrit. So you must get your mind on your own side. So this whole series will be geared towards those of us who have not gotten our mind on our side to our satisfaction. It's still a little bit rebellious, and it's falling back into zones that are formed out of past bad karma or bad habit, or maybe just into an attachment to pleasure. Or maybe just a on again, off again desire for freedom, which Ramakrishna has talked about in several of his stories that we've placed on the Godbog site. You can see. So if you're talking about original mind, you're talking about something that is attracted to Brahman, as I was just chanting about. So you would wake up in the morning, you'd think, as Sri Ramakrishna thought, another evening has passed or another 24 hours has passed, and I have not realized Brahman yet. I have not seen the face of my mother, Mother Kali. And so that would be foremost on his mind all the time, when the minute he would visit again the waking state. And if you had then an ordinary mind, you'd probably be under the auspice of a mind that unfortunately believes in matter. It's attached to matter, materialism. And the obsessed mind, of course, that's a desire-based mind that's focused in on objects, senses, and the pleasure that gets derived from them, as if to try and satisfy that desire. But as you've heard me say before, my teacher used to say, satiation never comes in that way. So unless you can find a way to turn that mind away from its obsession with matter and senses and objects, which is a high and mighty task to perform with your mind, that would be getting it on your side, or possibly then turn it even away from the ordinary mind that's attached to one of the beautiful phrases that our founder, Lex Sixon, talked about, mundane human convention. So it's going through its life attached just to conventions, and it would wake up in the morning thinking, as Krishna says in the Gita, I will attain that today. That which I couldn't get tomorrow, I will get today. So it's all about I and possessing and receiving. And so the ordinary mind will go out to its job or to its school or out into the world and will be possessed of that kind of mind, thinking that gathering more to itself is going to somehow satisfy it or make it happy or make it content. But as we just chanted with Shankar's sloka, beyond happiness and contentment is peace, and beyond that peace is this unalloyed bliss that they call Ananda. So here on the eve of Kali Puja, we want to talk about this mind that's so important to us that we have to keep it in equipoise. So again, that original mind would be sattvic or pure sattvic, and the ordinary mind would be rather active all the time, and the obsessed mind would be tamasic and lazy, hard to move. If you wanted to talk about the three gunas in a cosmic sense, then you'd call sattva cosmic equipoise or balance of everything. See everything in balance. But cosmic rajas would be an activity that's driven, like frenetic activity is a good word for it. And a slothful mind, hedonist, would just be inertia. It would be impossible to move that mind out of its state of laziness or habit. So this is a kind of a quick introduction or a preamble that I'm always wanting to give when I start into a class series like this, before we look at some charts to show us how to go about dropping the hot air balloons. Dropping the sandbags off the hot air balloon of the aspiring mind. The original mind is a very natural state, so you want to cut away the sandbags, I'm trying to say, the sandbags from that hot air balloon, so it will rise up naturally and spontaneously. So we'll look at a few of those, hopefully without broaching the negative too seriously, because in Vedanta, of course, we know that ignorance and suffering are unreal, so they can't really cause you any real doubt. They can't really cause you any real fear. So the doubt and the fear that you are experiencing, it would be a very good change that you would make to your mind, a transformation of mind, which is what we're going to talk about here pretty soon. Some progress that you'll make with your mind in any given day or lifetime, towards thinking that way, that these things are not really real, so they can't really cause you any real doubt or fear. It's a nice mantra to adopt when you have it. So we probably want to look first at this chart on progress towards freedom, because if we look in that direction, it'll be a good way of broaching the subject in the way that I want to broach it. That is, not talking about the obsessed mind as something that you can't get out of. I'm not talking about the ordinary mind as something that you can't transcend, but talking about both of these kinds of minds, like a state of consciousness that we're holding, and working through them with spiritual practices of the kind like mantra practice, study of scriptures, service of God and mankind, and devotion to the Lord, what's classically known as the 4 yogas. So we want to work through these lower two kinds of mind and arrive back at a natural state. This is the way I want to present it. It's as if we left this natural balance. We fell out of yoga, sometimes they say, and we fell into this kind of ordinary way of thinking, maybe conventional way of thinking, as we just said. And maybe that conventional way of thinking or mundane way of thinking led us to these habits that now makes the mind rather obsessed and attached to things which are not beneficial to it. So in this way, I'll introduce this first chart called Progress Towards Freedom. And just come in and make yourself at home here in our little ashram. Join our class on obsessed mind, ordinary mind, and original mind. And so we want to present these in a way that accents original mind as if it was just our natural state of being. Our founder, like Sixon, would say that about Paramahamsa Sri Ramakrishna, that he was just a natural human being. It's the way a human being should be. And this is the way we think about our seers and our saints and our illumined souls in India, is that they've either been born in the state of original mind, or if they had fallen from yoga via any kind of problem, then they would return to the state of original mind, and they would do so without a lot of undue effort. So you can see here, when we take up this chart called Progress Towards True Freedom, the word for freedom in India in Sanskrit is moksha. And moksha is a state of liberation that is not gained by attaining anything, as you're just returning to your original state. This is how Advaita Vedanta would teach it, for instance. And it's not attained through time or through evolution, although it seems to the practitioner that time is passing. And all of a sudden, this moment of enlightenment, they call it, will all of a sudden dawn upon the mind, and time will be seen to have had no effect on that progress. It's not something that's attained by evolution, like of species or over periods of time. And it's not something that can be gained by purification, but as you'll see by this 3-class series that we're about to embark on, purification is going to be necessary for the mind so that it realizes the natural state, which is called Atman in Vedanta, or it's called Brahman, as I just chanted about at the beginning of this class. That vast expanse of pure conscious awareness called Brahman, replete with the swell of the Atman, into which my mind fell like a hailstone falling into an ocean, transported me into a state of eternal peace and ecstatic bliss. So this state called moksha, also called mukti, in yoga it's called kaivalya, is a state that's natural to the human soul. So just as you may have heard from teachings of the Far East that you're not the body, there will be a time when the intellectual will have to find out that he or she is not the mind either. The mind is constantly changing, and it's called manas when it's in its changing state. That's dual mind. It thinks in terms of pleasure and pain, good and bad, virtue and vice, life and death, higher and lower, deeper and shallower. It's under the press of believing in the pairs of opposites, which are leading it through periods of suffering and happiness in turn. So when the mind becomes obsessed with these conflicting pairs of opposites or contrasting pairs of opposites, then it falls into a habit of that, and that's what we call obsessed mind. When it can get beyond the pairs of opposites and go beyond what we call manas, or dual mind, it gets more towards a qualified non-dualistic mind. All of a sudden it finds that it likes to listen to the teachings of the acharyas, of the seers, of the saints, of the gurus, and it likes to begin to act upon them and perform austerities and practices that will help it detach from those things that made it obsessed or attached to matter or objects or pleasure or desires. And then all of a sudden it reaches towards a state called original mind. That's this light of Brahman that shines in the heart. And it's birthless and it's deathless, and it's timeless, and it's beyond space, and it's beyond all sorts of change. It's what they call aparinama. It doesn't go through transformations. Everything here you see is going through transformations, including your mind. If you watch it in meditation, it'll sit for an hour maybe in the morning, and you'll experience one of these three things, this darkness called tamas, or all of a sudden the tamas will shift and there'll be some light, and you'll experience some activity or some restlessness. You'll begin thinking, maybe, what am I going to do today? You're supposed to be thinking about God in your meditation, having a vision of the divine being, or of reality, or of formless awareness, or of pure conscious awareness, whatever you call it, in different religious traditions of the world. But then in your meditation of an hour, all of a sudden you'll be very balanced, and you won't feel your body anymore. Your breath will become natural. And the in-breath, the held breath, and the out-breath, called puraka, kumbhaka, and arechaka in yoga, those three breaths will just become naturally balanced. Then if you fall back into rajas, all of a sudden you're breathing heavily again. And tamas, all of a sudden, you're not breathing at all. You're not taking in any oxygen to keep your spine straight, and to keep your posture right, keep your limbs from moving all the time. So in this kind of yoga, you want just one posture, not a lot of postures. I call that ekasana. So you want to, like Buddha under the bo tree, assume this one posture and hold it for a long time and balance your breath. And then you'll naturally go into the state of sattva. So this is giving you an advanced look at this chart, using the example of just a 1 hour meditation you might have in the morning or in the evening. So you'll know then the benefit of that is what? Oh, I learned some things about the Dharma. Yes, there's that. But the real benefit is you know that everything changes, that your mind is going through constant change all the time. But the mind of the seers and the sages and saints, their mind is not going through change. They're thinking about one thing and one thing alone. Thoughts on God, thoughts on Brahman, thoughts on the divine self, thoughts on the Ishtam. That's called the chosen ideal, like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and so forth. Their thoughts have settled on that one thing alone, and everything else, as Christ said, get thee behind me. It does not bother me anymore, because I now have vision of the Lord in front of me. And whereas I was attached to matter, desires, and objects with my senses before, now I'm attached to the feet of the Lord and to his beautiful face, or to her beautiful countenance. Tomorrow is Mother Kali's birthday, so Kali Puja is tomorrow. So she's a very fantastic form of the goddess that Sri Ramakrishna worshipped in Dakshineshwar Kali temple in India in the 1800s, and brought her forth from the cremation grounds of India to resurrect this dharmic wisdom, which I'm trying to impress upon you now, and which I've been trying to impress upon you in classes like this for 40 years. I've been doing it, sharing it with the West. So those few of us watching today, and those several hundred or thousand that will watch over the next few months, maybe I'm preaching to the choir, as they say. Maybe you already have a balanced mind. Maybe your mind isn't giving you any problem. So forgive me if that's the case. But then also contact me and tell me how to do that. You see, we want to know, we want to hear about how you reached equanimous state of mind. Sri Krishna calls that stiti pragnasya in the Gita. You see, they're a man or a woman of steady wisdom. So that wisdom that God not only exists, but is existence, is what we're talking about here in this condition of original mind. So the three O's, you see, obsessed, ordinary, and original is what we're trying to get into right now. Let's show you how that can happen in one mind, and how it can also, if you are attached to bad habits, like brooding. Your mind always broods. It should be a hot air balloon. Every morning should just be thinking of high and beautiful things. Why not? Why isn't the mind like that? Like the mind of the seers. So what is it? What are those sandbags that are holding my hot air balloon of my mind down to earth? Those rough, hot drafts of wind that are blowing my kite back towards the earth and not letting it soar. in its natural state. Well, they call that tamas. You can see here, it's also called tundra or darkness. It's a kind of sleep, but it's not deep sleep. It's a kind of sleep that's devoid of any kind of consciousness. You might see like a dog sleeps. Sometimes see a dog is running around doing various things. Other time that same dog is sitting in the sun with a kind of noble look on its face. Then that same dog later is like the tongue lolled out, ants are crawling on it, flies are lighting on it, and it's in a state of torpor. Tundra, they call that in Sanskrit. Same dog, 3 different states during the day. So the mind is rather like that, if you want to use it as an analogy. So this is also called avidya, or ignorance. Ignorance about what? It's about vital energy. I haven't got my vital energy flowing yet. The nerves, and they call nadis in yoga, in my body are cramped, you see. So my body becomes devoid of energy. So people slump a lot, you see, or their arm gets atrophied, or some disease happens with them. So illness comes to them when it shouldn't. So this natural process of balance is gone. This is the missing vital energy. That word is prana in Sanskrit. We haven't heard that much about prana in the West. Maybe Jesus mentioned it when he said, man does not live by bread alone. So maybe he was talking about we live by something else other than food. We live by vital force. It's what causes the eye to see, what causes the ear to hear, what causes the body to move. Yet we don't know much about it. See? So our prana is sleeping and it's not flowing. So I get my prana moving. Yes, you can eat better, you can sleep better, you can exercise better, and you can breathe deeper and all of that. And that will help the physical prana begin to move. You might improve your senses, you might improve the pleasure you get out of objects and so forth. But the prana they're talking about here is flowing in inner nerves, not outer nerves. It's not in the body, it's in your subtle body called your mind. And this is why we're speaking about it in this way. The mind that has become habitually turned off has got the prana. It'd be like stepping on a hose. Sometimes my chiropractor will use that analogy. So you stepped on a hose and the water can't get through, right? Or you crimped the hose. So that's a problem, and a perfect excuse for tamas, to get into you. You'll be visiting Mr. Thomas's neighborhood at that point, and Mr. Raj's neighborhood will come later. See? So meaning is missing from life when that happens, and selflessness is gone. Higher intelligence is not there. Living intelligence is not there. And the soul, you're ignorant about the soul. You think maybe the body is the soul, but that's called mamakara in Sanskrit. In English, if you think the body is the soul and the soul is the body, then that's the first evolute of Maya. I don't know if you know what Maya is, but that's that confusing property and everything. So if you've forgotten about your own soul, which is beyond the body and even beyond the mind, which is where we're headed right now, then that's going to be a great problem. So these are forms of ignorance, avidya, that you want to think about and throw out. Like Swami Vivekananda said, just look into your mind to see everything that hampers you, put it in a bag, take it somewhere and throw it in a river. Just get rid of it. Don't brood about it anymore. Don't worry about it anymore. Water the flowers, not the weeds. Try that as a practice. Try it for a day or two. See if you can outstrip this habit of obsessed mind that's fallen on you. It's not you, it's a habit that's in you. So you formed it, you can also break it. There's no God, there's no devil, that's going to help you break that. You have to do it. It's your formation. So if you see the column on the right-hand side, I've put 3 levels of this kind of tamas there. Spriha, desire, bhranti, delusion, and lokayatika, materialism. So we're trying to align this obsessed mind specifically to the guna of tamas, this power of laziness in us, sleepiness, this density of ignorance. These can go straight across the board with materialism, desire, and delusion. I'm not thinking right. See? Oh, I'm not thinking very well today. You haven't been thinking very well for lifetimes. This is the real truth of it. So wake up. See? Listen to these teachings. Believe in them. Have faith in them. Do a practice around them. Realize them like great souls like Buddha and Jesus and Krishna did. And then come out of the darkness. It's that simple. And you can do it, as my Hungarian nephew says sometimes. You can do it. See? Now, on the way towards rajas, there's a kind of blend of slothfulness and activity. So, I mean, if you can just get the English under control here, then you'll know what these Sanskrit words are meaning. It's not rocket science. It's basically just slothfulness, restlessness, and balance is what we're talking about. So when you combine this kind of ignorance, heaviness with this frenetic activity, there's an admixture that happens. So notice the difference between tundra and darkness and ignorance to sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family, pastimes, feelings, and brooding. You've made a jump. You see. Now you're not sitting around feeling sorry for yourself all the time. You're actually beginning to get participating in mundane human convention. You can see basically obsessed mind is beginning to turn into the lower strata of ordinary mind here, because most people, they like their families, they like their pleasures, they like their parties, they like their excitement, but that doesn't free them from brooding and problems. They'll go enjoy for a while, and then they'll go and suffer for a while. They'll go enjoy for a while, and you have to make some sort of conclusion that one leads to the other. This is what Buddha called a cycle of thing. Samsara, he called it. So you can't expect to have one without the other. And when people believe that they can't have one for another, that's where this delusion gets a hold of them, and they fall right back into darkness again. They get disappointed in the fact that they can't have it all their own way, can't have everything in this world. And it disappoints them, and they fall back into darkness. But what you want to do is, and let's go on so we get through this chart today, is to get over this darkness and this restlessness by using some activity. So if we go over here and see some of the equivalents here, we want to get beyond distraction, pleasure seeking, and sense enjoyment. Sometimes the stronger souls will do that by renunciation. I'm just not going to listen to my ego anymore. I'm going to take away everything from it. And it's going to have to learn to live without. And I'm going to see how that works. I'm going to reject everything. I'm going to renounce everything. I'm going to detach from everything. I'm going away from all things in order that my mind have some resting place, some breathing space to expand. My lungs expanded, that helped me. Now my mind has to expand. So that's going from bandha, or bondage, it almost sounds the same in Sanskrit and English, to this level of pretense and vanity. So rajas is still accompanied by what we call over here kapata, or deception, because the ego has gotten a hold of everything, and there's a lot of emotionalism involved in it. And when it gets disappointed, it becomes indifferent to things. And so the ego has gotten a hold of everything. It's taking it in its own direction. Basically, you could say the ego didn't really want you when you were here. But now that you're beginning to show signs of life, it wants all those things. The ego, like your mind, is not yourself. They call the ego the small self. And it needs to be ripened. It has to turn into the great self. Om Tachnayo Ravrini Mahe Gatum Yagyaya Gatum Yenu Patai. Beautiful peace chant in India that says, come, let's make an offering of the small self into the great self. Let's take everything the ego wanted and give it to God, if you want to put it that way. Surrender it all to the Divine Mother. And take away from the ego all these things that are causing it to be heavy with tamo and rajas. So there you've got false attainment, you've got assumed status, you've got feigned authority, and you've got the sense of superiority happening to that person who has reached this level of vain glory, we call it, like our military. The different countries in the world have their military are full of vainglory. Oh, I've got so many thousands of missiles, I've got so many millions of tanks, I've got so many soldiers in my army. It's all vanity, vanity, and vanity. It's all this bloated ego based around violence and domination. It's obvious to most people who have intelligence that that's what's going on. But that's also the nature of this world. So what can you do about it? You can try and raise yourself up and out of it. And you don't want to worry about it or brood about it. You want to get active, and then you want to get free. So you want to use this energy of Rajas, or reaching here, Rajasattva, a kind of balanced energy now is happening. So this is a kind of shift I'm talking about in accord with our three-part title: obsessed mind, ordinary mind, original mind. For instance, you could sing about it, because they say basically, I've been leaving out these quotes of Vivekananda, but when he says about tamas, he says, what we want about that is that each person has to work out his or her own freedom. And then he says, advancement towards liberation is freedom. It's the worthiest gain. So if you can make your mind shift towards this desire for freedom and this feeling of getting free of bondage, so you always feel bound. You want to make freedom now your new goal. This is what you want to seek. Then you want to go beyond social rules and conventions that stand in the way of freedom. As I was just talking about, a lot of the things that are wrong with this world: violence, domination, greed, so forth. The akushalas are called in Buddhism, the three great bondages, or the four deadly traps, they're called in Hinduism. So basically, you want to get beyond this level of mrisa, they're calling it here, pretense. So he says, go beyond those social rules that are injurious. Go beyond irreligion to true religion, is how he used to put it. Because you can't take religion away, as some people opine. That's not going to work. You just want to make sure that you're following true religion and not irreligion. And about the next level, Vivekananda says, there must be freedom of the individual to express his or her nature. So we have to have this freedom in order to express ourselves, express our highest self. And that's where things start getting good. You start reaching this level of Rajasattva. Look at some of the words there. It's associated with Chaitanya, spiritual awakening. Our great master, Sri Ramakrishna, used to sometimes touch people on the head and say, Chaitanya Ho. So you have a hand fall on your head, say, Chaitanya Ho, may your spiritual consciousness be awakened. So that's all very beautiful and everything, but it also intimates something deeper, is that you were asleep. If he has to awaken your spiritual consciousness, it must mean that you've been sleeping all your life. So you need to be awake like him. That's what attracted you to him and to all the great souls, is that they were spiritually awake. They were not suffering, they were in bliss. They were not malcontent, they were in peace. They were not just content, they were satisfied, fulfilled. So then you look to them as the great exemplars. They're not saviors. We don't, in India, we like the word exemplar better than savior. Because you have to save yourself is the greatest truth. There's no savior can really save you. But if the savior sees that you can save yourself, that you're making an effort, then there'll be an example for you, and you can raise yourself up under your own auspice. So these great souls in India, they're called exemplars. They show you what it is that you're aspiring for. And then you can model yourself after them. So if you're at that Rajasattva level, the line becomes Chaitanya. You look at some of the concomitants there. You start thinking deeper. Alochana, it's a nice word in Sanskrit. You start doing self-effort. So like when you get up in the morning, time to do my practice. It's not time to eat. It's not time to brush my teeth. It's not time to go over to my friends. It's not time to go to work. It's time to do my practice. So that's the rudder of your boat of your life right there. If you man the rudder of your boat, you do that before you eat, go to work, or do anything, then your practice stands you in good stead the whole day. And you can come back to your practice that night and measure what happened to you during the day. And your ego is then going to not smart so much, you see. It's going to accept that it goes from practice to practice to practice to practice, not from sorrow to joy to sorrow, or not from sorrow to sorrow, and then more sorrow the next day. Then it all of a sudden rises. You've made your way even past the ordinary mind and making good progress towards this original mind. And what happens there at the higher level of that's called upalabdhi in Sanskrit. It's called perception. So you begin to perceive things that you haven't perceived before. Things that were hidden to you about your own self, about the nature of the world, and about the nature of reality. That's called the real and the unreal, by the way, in Vedanta. So Krishna says in the Gita, na asat vidyate, bhavo na bhavo, vidyate sataha. He's saying, the unreal never exists. The real never ceases to be. The truth about both of these has been known by the luminaries. So they know it, they're exemplifying it, but they're trying to convince you of it, that there's nothing here that is real that can cause you suffering. You're causing yourself suffering. So wake up and cause yourself to realize this great joy inside of yourself. Because the unreal never is, the real never ceases to be. So there's only divine reality here. In everything, there's just divine reality. You're seeing it as objects. You're seeing it as suffering. You're seeing it as veils. But there's nothing but Brahman permeating everything here. It even permeates the atoms which permeate objects. It's the substratum. It's the background consciousness. That's how Meister Eckhart called it in Christianity. It's the background substratum or consciousness to everything. That's what you begin to perceive. And you were blind to it before your teacher awakened you to it, or the scriptures spoke of it, or you started meditating on it in your daily sadhana, in your practice. So Vivekananda says, there must be freedom for the individual to express his or her own nature. So we sing about him sometimes. Murta Maheshwara Ujjvala Bhaskaram Ishtaya Maranaravandyam. Murta Maheshwaram Ujjvala Bhaskaram Ishtaya Maranaravandyam. Vande Vedatanum Ujita Garhita Kanchana Kamini Bandam. Vande Vedam Tanum Ujita Garhita Kanchana Kamini Bandam. Murta Mahe bashkaram ishtaya maranadavanyam Urtamaheshwaram ujvala bashkaram ishtaya maranadavanyam. We offer tribute to Swami Vivekananda, who is Shiva incarnate, who is the radiant sun of knowledge, reverently adored by celestial and earthly beings. We worship that one, the very personification of truth, who is eternally free and whom the inscrutable fetters of Maya could never bind. And the song goes on and on like that with many verses. So this is this great soul, Swami Vivekananda, who's brought Vedanta to the West, which is what we're talking about today, and what we're trying to explain in deeper measure with the levels of this chart, from obsessed mind to ordinary mind to original mind, or from the darkness of tamas to the energy of rajas to the enlightenment of sattva. You like sattva, don't you? Most people like to wake up in a sattvic state, but they don't know what to call it. Oh, I was in a good mood. I was in a bad mood yesterday. What happened? Well, meditate and find out, because somewhere in time, in that increment you called 24 hours, your mind shifted unbeknownst to you, and it was now not restless, it was dark. And then later on in the day or during your sleep, it shifted back to balance and you woke up feeling fine and you said, what happened to me? This is all in nature that's happening to you, because nothing happens in your soul. It all happens in nature. Your soul is pure and perfect. Nature's got all the change in it. One of the teachings of the Gita by Sri Krishna. All change takes place in nature, Arjuna, not in you, he tells his disciple on the battlefield. All change takes place in nature, not in you. So you need to, as I chanted, merge the words into your mind, the mind into your intellect, the intellect into your ego, the ego into your Atman, or into your witness, and then the witness into your Atman, and see all of nature changing outside of you, and be free from it. In yoga, that's called kaivalya, freedom from changing things, freedom from nature. When you go to sleep tonight, in deep sleep, you're free of nature, you don't know it. But nature's not there. Trees aren't there, plants aren't there, rivers aren't there. Your mind took them all away and dissolved them. You wake up again, there they come dancing back like magic, you see. But that kind of change did not bother Swami Vivekananda, because it says here, the inscrutable fetters of Maya could never bind or change him, because he had realized his true nature. That's why so many songs like this have been written about him since he came here in 1893. And 5 million people have rushed now to him, and more are coming. Behold the perfect man, Swami Vivekananda, the Nityasiddha, Sri Ramakrishna called him. Naren was born perfect soul. So now, like a flower blooming in the woods, bees are coming. They don't need an imitation. They're finding out about this great soul, whose great ideal is Mother Kali, which is today's or tomorrow's holy day in our tradition. So these quotes that I'm talking to you about are all about Swami Vivekananda. She's telling you there must be freedom of the individual to express his or her nature. So people are saying, I can't express myself, because you're still obsessing with your imperfect nature. You are not evil. You're not a sinner. It's the worst sin to call another man a sinner. He said that. He came here to the West and he looked and he said, what are you believing these people of irreligion for? They're calling you a sinner, but it's the worst sin to call another person a sinner. You're perfect. You're divine. You do not change. Nature changes around you, and then by you obsessing with nature, you get swept into the illusion of change. Like, oh, I was dark yesterday, I'm restless today, and tomorrow I'm balanced. That's nonsense. You're always balanced. So until you recognize that that's what's going on to you, you cannot renounce it. See, you have to recognize the wool is being pulled over your eyes. And if you look, you'll see back here, it's your own hand that's doing it, you see. And then it's running away, so you look and say, well, I guess the devil's doing it, you see. Or look again, well, I guess God's doing that to me. There's no God and there's no devil, except inside of you. You're doing it to yourself. So cease thy hold, let go thy hold. Say Om Tat Sat. Say, I am perfect, I am pure, I am freedom. And I will not fall victim to the sleight of hand of samsara or of Maya anymore. I renounce it here and now. I give it up. And I will be my true and perfect and pure nature for the rest of my life, as I always have been up to this point, you see. I've been deluded. See. I wasn't thinking deep enough. I didn't get any higher perception from my parents or from my society. I didn't get any teachings of the Dharma. I never found a guru to enlighten me, to tell me that thou art that you are pure and perfect, you see. So this is what's beginning to happen to you, and I hope I'm describing it in a way that's mounting, like an inner mounting flame, you see, they call it. The flame of consciousness is beginning to surface and is taking away the drowsiness of lifetimes. I fell asleep for lifetimes, not knowing that I was pure and perfect. Now I'm beginning to waken up, you see. I'm shaking off the drowsiness of sleep, and I'm beginning to see that I am pure and I am perfect, that I am Atma Brahman, that this self is God. There is no other self but this. There is no other God here but me and you. We're all that, you see. Have you found any other God anywhere? Up in the clouds? Down? Below? It's in you, it's in me, but it's hidden, like oil and sesame seeds. See? Like patina and copper. It's hidden. You have to bring it out. The best things are always hidden. And the worst things are always right in your face, you see. So you must deny these and refine your consciousness to be able to see that. See those inner verities and bring them out. You must go within, you see, to do that. Reminds me of another song. You talk about ordinary mind. Ordinary mind, it's not possible to see God inside itself or in anything. You have to rise to this original mind. You know how Einstein said you can't correct an error made on a certain level from another level. You have to go back to that level that you made the error to correct it. So that's what you have to do. You have to go back to the place where you created this karma and undo it, and then be free. See? But you can't take the ordinary mind back to that level and expect it to do anything. You have to take this new, fresh, original mind. Kuruchi kumantri jato nikat hote dionako Gyanayone prahori reko shejano dionako Achane hridaye reko adarini shamamake Jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake adarini shamamake. Oh, blissful mind, awaken to the enchanting vision of the Divine Mother by opening your inner eye of wisdom. Upon perceiving her form within you, enshrined in your heart, withdrawn to that sacred chamber of ecstatic love and behold her there in secret. Abiding in that exalted condition, remember that the ordinary mind connected to the five senses cannot enter there. So this is the lesson that Kamalakanta, one of these great poet saints of India, sings about going into your own heart and seeing the divinity there inside of yourself. He calls her Mother Shama. You know? She's like blue-black. Shama is a color. It's like the color of Krishna's skin. So the Divine Mother Kali, whose birthday is tomorrow, we see this is Mother Shama. So he loves Mother Shama with all his heart. So he goes inside of his heart and he tries to see her there in this secret chamber of ecstatic love, but his mind rebels. It won't fit into the heart. It's like the heart's a round hole, and the mind's a square peg, you see. It won't go in, you see. So the ordinary mind is like that. It's coming up against these barriers to visit the heart. So you have to shave off that square peg, you see, round it so it will fit nicely in there. So this is what we're trying to do, to go from ordinary mind to illumined mind, or what we're calling original mind. It's a nice phrase, an original mind. So they speak about it, the scriptures, the seers write about it, the scriptures contain it, and their songs are full of it. This is one of hundreds of songs I learned in India to express these truths. So we get to the top of this chart, things really get good. You see, if you reach the sattvic state, then you can see here, we're calling it mumukshutvam. The Swami in India I met, that we were really close, was Mumukshananda, a beautiful, beautiful old Swami. It's just as pure as bubbles rising on fresh drawn milk. Just this pure soul that I met. Mumukshutvam is this pure desire for liberation. I don't want anything. If you saw God standing before you, what do you want? People with an obsessed mind would want the world, you see. People with an ordinary mind would want more exquisite pleasures in heaven. But people with an original mind said, free me from all of this. I only want freedom. Freedom from the body, freedom from the senses, freedom from objects, freedom from lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, shame. From grief, from fear, from doubt. Let's see. The 6 passions, the 8 fetters, the 9 antarayas, the 3 akushalas in Buddhism. Free me from all that. See, my mind doesn't want those anymore. This is a very strange fact that people who suffer begin to become addicted to suffering. You might have noticed. There's a hypochondria going on, in people's bodies, but there's also kind of hypochondria going on in people's souls. They like to suffer without their help from their own self. So that's why they need an exemplar first. And the exemplar puts their foot on the road, the right path, and says, go that way, walk that way, do not deviate anymore. Go straight to the source. And this is what happens then when you find this desire to be free inside of yourself. And they even have a word for it in our tradition, world weariness. I'm weary of this world. Obviously, a person like that isn't going to fear death because he's not the body, so he knows he doesn't die. There's no death. That's an illusion. You never die. The soul doesn't die. Why is that? Because it was never created. You can't kill something that was never created, that was never born. The soul doesn't get born and it doesn't die. That's a bunch of nonsense we've been taught. Your body is born and it dies, but not your soul. How did you fall into confusion around that fact? So if you're a birthless, deathless soul, you're not worrying about death of body or ego when you see the Lord and say, give me freedom. Give me freedom from the trammels of life, from the vagaries and vicissitudes of life and vault me, transport me into transcendental consciousness, into the nirvana of Buddhism, into the asampragyata of yoga, into the nirvikalpa of Vedanta, into the fana of the Muslim religion, into the satori of Zen. Vault me into those right now. I can't wait. There's nothing here that I haven't given up to pay the price, to pay for my admission into this state. And this state is beyond heaven. Our tradition makes that real clear. Heaven is where you go with your ancestors, and they all come back to earth with you. So Buddha's teaching was get beyond the cycle of being reborn with your ancestors. In the West, we hardly know anything about rebirth, but it's an obvious fact in the Far East. China, India, they all know about rebirth. And they know that unless you can be reborn free of ignorance, it's not worth coming here. But as soon as you give rise of ignorance inside of you, then this is the last place you want to come. Because Buddha will come here and tell you, number one, there's suffering. You might as well stop there. The other three noble truths, you won't understand them till you know that there is suffering here and that you can't get free of it until you get free of your ignorance. You can't work it away. You can't birth it away. You can't love it away. You have to destroy it with your own wisdom. Ignorance will only go away with wisdom. Nahi gyanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate. The God of love said that. You get rid of ignorance by wisdom. It's the best purifier. So get your ducks in a row, you see. Master the three gunas. Bring yourself to a balanced state. Then see where your suffering went. Then see what happened to your doubt. Then see what happened to your fear. Because none of the illumined souls have those. They're free of them. Well, that's what I'm trying to explain here. That's their desire for freedom culminated in freedom. What happens there, prasanna, I know a few people in India whose names were named prasanna. Their parents named them clarity. May you have clarity of mind. May you have peace of mind. First and foremost. So I'm going to name you that. And what else happens there? Attainment. Adhigama in Sanskrit. You get some actual attainment under your belt. And now you have something to fend off ignorance with. See, if anything comes at you out of the realm of Mara, or the realm of Maya, or the realm of hell, you can just say, I'm sorry, you don't have any admittance here. I'm eternal, pure, perfect, birthless, deathless, timeless, spaceless, and nothing can harm me. And that little devil, whatever it is, will just turn its tail and run. It has no power over you anymore. What else happens there? Samasti chitta. Chitta means your thoughts usually. It can also mean your consciousness. Samasti means universal. So you have a universal mind. I can go into the church and bow down with the Christians. I can go to the Kaaba and do circumambulation with the Muslims. I can go to the Hindu temple and worship Krishna. I can go to any religion anywhere with this universal mind and I'll be accepted as one of them. Because there's no difference between them and I. We're all the same soul. We're not the same egos, we're not the same bodies, we're not the same minds, but we're all the same soul. Based on that one fact, I have samasti chitta. And now I may pass anywhere. I'll be accepted amongst the holy of the holy. Nobody can keep me out because I'm one with Brahman. I and my Father are one. Does this sound familiar? So at the very top of that is pure sattva, and there's that word I started off this whole chart with, moksha, perpetual freedom. It's not a freedom that's won, gets attained, happens in time, or it happens through evolution. It's now. It's a state upon you right now. You just need to pull a few veils away. I've been dreaming myself to be bound. See, I always have been free. Revelation of revelation. I am that. That thou art. And the result of all that is up here. That boundless ocean of consciousness into which my mind fell like a hailstone into an ocean, experienced eternal peace and ecstatic bliss. Nanda. There are thousands of people with that last name now. The Swamis of India, they all have the last name Ananda. You wouldn't want to deliver a telegram to any monastery, you see. Is Mr. Ananda here? They'd all stand up. You wouldn't know who to give it to. So they all took on this name, this last name, Ananda. I am the supreme bliss. I am none other than that. And nobody can tell them different because they've realized it. So there's where we have this beautiful transition, if you want to call it that, from attached mind to ordinary mind to original mind. Now, most of us have an ordinary mind. Let's just say the greater percent of humanity, 7 billion people on Earth. We'd have to go count them, and it'd take a long time. But ordinary mind just means basically family, job, the usual run of things out there. There's not a lot of people who wake up and think, "Where's God?" Or "I'm that." See, those kinds of insights don't come to people. But we're beginning to see this increasing of the encroachment of obsessed mind on the ordinary mind, if I may say so. If you look particularly at the Western countries, but the whole world is beginning to shift its ordinary mind over to obsession or attached mind. And so this is where all these problems are coming up that people are complaining about so much in every run of life. In spiritual life, your advantage is that you can witness it happening before it happens. So you're standing back from it in a detached state of witness consciousness, watching things happen to people and not participating, and trying to get them to come to you, you see. "No, I'm not coming there, sorry. You come here." You must raise them up, raise their consciousness up. And we have found that the best way to do that is teachings of the Dharma, and the teachings of what we call in India Atmagyan, these special wisdom teachings that you don't hear many people talking about. Certainly nobody with an ordinary mind talks about them or thinks about them. So there must be this transitional point where ordinary minds begin to think, "I'm through with the earth and all its doings. I wasn't satisfied with them in the end. And all I have to pay for it is a hope to go to heaven. And I'm not even sure of that. So where's the truth here? How can I shift this higher run of ordinary mind into original mind? Because I see all these souls that are ecstatic, all the Anandas of the world. See, they're free of all of this weight. All the sandbags have been cut off the hot air balloon of their mind. There's some of those sandbags, and if we have time for them, could be shown in both these charts. In the final minutes here, let's look at them. Sandbags you want to cut off the hot air balloon of your mind. Because hot air balloons, if you drop sandbag, there they go, you see. Nothing holds them down. So your mind has to be buoyant like that. This is a teaching given by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. The hot air balloon of the mind, it will float naturally towards these higher elevations. This broad expanse of universal sky that we just talked about. So in India, then you have teachings like this: the 3 enemies of reason, the 3 stupefactions, and the 4 deadly traps. There's three different teachings that I put together in one chart here. So there you see the first of them. It's not rocket science. The three enemies of reason are egotism, called garva in Sanskrit, amarsha, called intolerance, and asuya, narrowness. So reason, that's what I was just talking about. It's a very nice segue from back here, right? What are we talking about here? Samasta chitta, right? Universal mind. Well, here's the opposite of universal mind. Dark reason, skewed reason. It's egotistic about its power, about its possessions, and about its religion. It goes to war with other religions when peace is what it should be, trying to cultivate. It's intolerant of everything else other than its own way. And it's very narrow in its scope of understanding. It echoes out everything except just what it feels is right. So these are called a good teaching, the three enemies of higher reason. You won't find people who are reasonable who have even one of these in them. They're going to have to expand towards universal mind. They're going to have to see the whole family of humanity as one with themselves. When you see that one in me, in yourself, and in all others, then you'll be free, Arjuna, Krishna says in the Gita. There is but one, the free, the knower, the self, without a name, without a form or stain. In Maya is dreaming all this dream, see. The witness, he appears as nature, soul, and thou art that. Vivekananda, in one of his beautiful hymns, heard that. So there is but one, the free, the self, without a name, without a form or stain. Just right there, you've got this whole idea of samasta chitta. How did Shankara put it? This ego is like the enemy of the self, concealed like a thorn in the throat. Even after it has been cut away, if it is attended to even for a moment, it will only revive again and cause hundreds of distractions. Like clouds dispersing and gathering again in the rainy season. It sounds a lot like Lord Buddha, too, and the way he talked about it. So, thorn in the throat. Sri Ram mentioned that thousands of years before Shankara. And clouds coming and going in the rainy season. Lord Buddha mentioned that 550 years before Jesus. So they're using these same analogies from different religions to describe the very same problem of this unripe ego. Ahamkara, they call that. So people think they are this individual ego. They're really this universal Atman. How to shift that obsessed mind through the strata of ordinary mind to the original mind, the Atman. Because Buddha said, Buddha mind, pure mind is Buddha mind. Sri Ramakrishna said, pure mind is Brahman. So we have both of those in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and in the Dhammapada, these two great scriptures of these two great beings. So they're both agreeing, they're concurring that this is the truth. But the ordinary mind doesn't know anything about it, and the obsessed mind is probably not going to find out about it for lifetimes, if ever. And the result of that's suffering. But the result of this is bliss. I don't know how clearer to put it than that. And the proof is there in the pudding. So you might say, there's suffering, do you want that? No. Here's bliss, do you want that? Yes. Then what do you have to do to get from there to there? Study the teachings. Change your way of thinking. Extract yourself out of things like the three great enemies of reason. And these three stupefactions, what are they? Worldliness, insensitivity, and jadedness. At least that's the best English words I could come up with for vyutana chitta, mentioned in yoga, and ajanataha and ahaituka, these Sanskrit words. So I found equivalents, close equivalents. Worldliness has become the chronic disease of the age. It's another way of saying ordinary and obsessed mind. And insensitivity, it means I'm not paying attention to the words of the wise ones in my culture and in my religion. Of course, if religion has failed you, then you have to go deeper or elsewhere to find these truths. So how does Shankara put it here? By seizing upon, possessing, and brooding over the sense objects, man desensitizes himself to the needs of others and becomes jaded. So the watchwords are selfishness or selflessness. See, there's a nice pair of opposites to meditate on. I think I will do away with my selfishness. I'll try and be more selfless because I see the saints have become selfless and they're concerned with the good of others. So it's not about me, right? If I'm suffering, if I start to serve others, my suffering will go away. But instead I brood upon my suffering and it increases. So there's always a better, wiser way out. You don't have to remain caught in tamas or rajas. You can rise to this balance. It's in you. You have the power of doing it. The final teaching down here is the 4 deadly traps. You don't want to get caught in these, they say. Guilt, grief, depression, and low self-esteem. They're dead ends. See, you do not want to brood on these. You do not want to take them as even being real. They're nightmares that came to you and a bad night's sleep. So the quote there, the negative effects of actions done in the wrong spirit lead to a kind of remorse that is not only counterproductive, but debilitating as well. Therefore, one should steer clear of the 4 deadly traps of guilt, grief, depression, and lack of self-worth. So as you go through your life from day to day, night to night, year to year, and so forth, you might hear of any one of these. You might see people who are suffering from them. But if you put them all together in one chart and look at it, it gives you a plan, you see. Oh, I'm going to be on the watch for all of these. All 10 of these. Call them the 10 properties of the ego if you want. In this same fashion, let's see what Buddhism, because we're looking here more at a Hinduism Vedanta chart. Let's see what, if we have time, let's see if we can look at how Buddhism calls these. They're called akushala mula, akushala mula. And yeah, there's the jackal and the buzzard. They're having a nice conversation, you see. The jackal's saying to the buzzard, as it were, this is my stinking, rotting, old, fetid, maggot-infested carcass. Go get your own. And the buzzard's not having it. And those little dots you can see, if you saw it closer up, are flies. There are thousands of them. So one of my students sent me this, and I said, I'll put that in a chart. It's worthy of showing. So I put it under this teaching called akushala mula. It's the 3 unwholesome roots. Now, maybe to us, the 10 commandments are known in Western religion. And there's probably some teachings of a negative kind that we would gravitate to. But in the East, then you're talking about these lists that come forth, like the 6 passions: lust, anger, jealousy, pride, shame, grief, pride of caste, pride of lineage. 8 fetters and 6 passions are called. And then there's, in yoga, there's the 9 antarayas. So you've got all these very unsavory things that are in the minds of people. And in Buddhism, they've meditated on it for a while and said, I think the 3 worst are these. So this is Buddhism's opinion. Basically, you can see it there. Tanha, dukkha, and samsara, basically craving, suffering, and rebirth, come out of these three. They're called delusion, greed, and ill will. Sorry for all the negative teachings here, but I just took you to a place called bliss. I want you to see what the opposite end of things are like, how people of obsessed mind or attached mind, what they're laboring under. Then maybe some compassion will be there and you can help them. You can go thou from place to place and help them out of darkness. Beyond the fear of pain or the search for pleasure, go beyond them both, as Vivekananda said in this beautiful poem. So you can see here, it's called Trivisa, the three poisons. Delusion, moha, greed, lobha, and hatred, dvesha. But Buddhism isn't without its solutions. So if you have these problems, if you had delusion, like you weren't thinking clearly, as we saw in the last chart, then you'd want to inject yourself with pragya, or have your teacher give you an injection of pragya. It's called wisdom. So you want this injection of what we call my teacher, Swami Sheshananda, gave us an injection of Atmagyan. See, the West needs an injection of Atmagyan, he said. There's pictures on the top here. And so we would extend our arms and roll up our sleeves. Say, go ahead, shoot away. See, we're tired of this nonsense in our country and in our religion. So give us a deep injection of Brahmagyan. So that's what would be the remedy for delusion or moha. Moha is also one of the 10 evolutes of Maya. How about the solution for greed? Generosity, of course, or what Buddha would call dhanam. You give away things to people, worthy people particularly, but you give freely to all, your wealth, your time, your energy. And you're so busy doing this great act that all of a sudden you wake up one morning and your greed is gone, utterly gone. You don't have it anymore. And you have to see what it feels like to be without it in order for it to be gone forever. It's one of the problems of attaching to it, watering the weeds and not the flowers. Because I become greedy. See, it's not just I'm thinking about greed or I am greedy. I actually become greedy. Like a man saying, I became angry. See, you became anger? You see, how is that possible? You don't want to become anything negative, do you? So don't ever say that. See, I transcended anger. You can come and say that. So use generosity to get rid of greed. Do something of higher merit, and do it on purpose for people without expecting anything in return. If you go out, like altruism, if you go out and try and do something so that you can say I did something good, so that you will be lauded for doing something good, it's not going to work. Karma yoga will not work that way. Karma yoga will only work, that is, if you do it selflessly, without any expectation of return. And you can't convince a businessman of this. You can't convince a pro bono lawyer of this. They've always got something in the back of their mind that this is going to benefit them. You have to do this act completely free of desiring any return or recompense whatsoever for it to be a pure act. These are one of the laws of karma yoga that Krishna lists in the Gita. And finally, hatred, loving kindness, they call that metta. It's a nice word. So if there's hatred, then you try and sow love. It kind of follows St. Francis's prayer, if you've heard that. Where is hatred, may I sow love, where is poverty, may I sow well-being, and so forth. That beautiful prayer that we've often heard in the Christian context. That's pretty much it, and we've run out of time, but you can see here the stamp for the three akushalas. I like it. Basically, it's the snake, the pig, and the rooster. None of them known for having the best qualities in the animal kingdom. So they've strung them all together in one insignia. It's like a stamp. Well, I stamped this full of the three akushalas, don't go near it. It's sort of like, a skeleton with crossbones. oh, there's nuclear waste in there, don't go in there. So you put this stamp, you stamp it on anything that has a negative connotation to it, and you stay away from it. You don't want to go near those things. The quote here is very beautiful. Greed is overt attraction to gratifying objects, which is removed by the practice of generosity. Hate is ill will that stands in the way of gratification, and which is overcome through cultivation of loving kindness. Delusion refers to inconsistency of thought and action with regards to reality, and is removed by insight. The removal of these three is necessary for enlightenment. Cannot be much more straightforward than that. That's from the Dhammapada. That's Lord Buddha saying that. So this is how to get rid of these three poisons. And we have been able to do 3 teaching charts, 3 Dharma charts today. We'll read the final quote here about this one, and we will move on next week to begin looking at how ordinary mind can transform itself into original mind. So about this image that's so striking, the jackal in this image represents the greedy ego. The buzzard stands for multitudes of ignorant souls occupying the world. The rotting carcass epitomizes the material objects that both pursue. Swarms of flies buzzing about are the tiny demons of delusion that cause forgetfulness of one's divine nature. The solution for all of this is imbibing the teachings of the Dharma and combining them with spiritual practice. So nicho nichanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman tamatmastam yenu pashanti diraha tesham shantihi shashvati netaresham. Om peace, peace, peace. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. That one, the illumined souls realize is dwelling in their very self. To them belong peace and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.